I'm looking for the link and Magali already sent it to me and so I'm embarrassed that I
can talk about you.
Thank you, I'm sorry. So organized, but there's something.
Probably have like 30 links because you're giving testimony.
I have a system and my system's failing me right now.
That's because it's a system.
It's Friday.
We are live.
You're right. Welcome, everyone, to the House Committee on General and Housing. Today is still Friday, the 17th of January. Means we are more than halfway through the month. We are hearing this afternoon from Maura Collins, the Executive Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, who has testified before us once before this session. Since she has testified before us once before, we will skip the formality of reintroducing the committee to her and turn it over to her once she can figure out how to get her slides going.
I'm there. I'm sharing my screen as it's. Shall I jump in?
Yeah, I think you do need to state your name for the.
Oh, I know.
No, I did.
No, this is great. I am still Maura Collins and thankfully I'm still the Executive Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. So thank you for having me back. When I was here last week, I was talking a big picture about the housing needs in the state and what VHFA's role is in meeting that. I'd like to go into a little more detail, refresh your memory about that, but also then talk about some of the programs, many of which originated in this committee. And this committee has long supported and talk a bit about that and then answer questions you may have for me. I already explained this to you, but I came up with a better graphic, I think, this time. But I told this to you last week and I'm going to tell it to you again, which is we get money from investors, we lend it out to home buyers or developers of affordable rental housing. Because we've just made those mortgages, we get the money back from those mortgage payments, and then we use that money to pay back the investors, and we live off the difference.
Laura, you do not sell, consequently, you don't sell loans. Or
We will, we do securitize our single family loans into mortgage-backed securities that get sold to Freddie and Fannie. And then we buy those securities. So either the government sponsored enterprises are buying the securities or we will buy the securities with the underlying loans. But no, we're not selling the loans. We're actually investing in our own.
you securitize your own loans?
Since 2009, the financial crisis, we shifted from a whole loan model where we could control the underwriting of our homeownership loans. And we held each of those loans as individual investments. Starting in 2009, along with every other state housing finance agency in the country and most other lenders, everyone started packaging like loans together. And then again, we buy the security of those packaged loans. So we have a financial partner who packages them together and securitizes them. We buy them. The difference in what this means for us is that back in the day when we had whole loans, when those loans went south, because some of them do, we took on the financial risk of that. And actually, the reason we made this change was a year before the financial crisis, we were looking at this because if you own all these whole loans, we were doing so much business and our mortgage loans were so popular. We did not have enough capital to hold in reserve that was required. And it felt inefficient for a quasi-governmental agency to be sitting on millions of dollars because a rating agency said we should and not deploying that money for Vermonters. And we're like, you know what the better model is? Let's get all our money out the door and not have to reserve so much. So under the securitization model that we do now, we don't have to hold as much in reserves. We can have this flow of funds that you see on the screen happening much more efficiently. And the reason we don't have to hold so much in reserves is because we no longer hold the financial risk if these mortgages go bad. So if we securitize a couple $1 million of loans and then we buy that security and we're earning off of those mortgage payments so that we can pay our investors, what it means is that when Mora's loan goes belly up, Mora's loan gets pulled out, the pool continues to earn money and do what it does, but Mora's loan is now owned by US Bank and they take the financial risk.
And you know
they
what,
figure that out.
I'll spend some time with you separately to go more deeply into this. But I think if we went any more deeply into this now, we would lose a substantial number of us, myself included. So go ahead, feel free to move on and
Yeah.
then we'll return to this.
I could talk about this stuff all day.
You don't say.
So I think I explained this before, there are benefits to borrowing from VHFA. For home buyers, they're getting a cheaper interest rate from us. They also can access some down payment assistance that I'm going to talk more about. They also can get a grant if they're a first time home buyer. I'm going to talk about that program more. And we offer a lower property transfer tax. You all have put it in statute that if you get a VHFA mortgage as well as some other kinds, you pay a little less than the property transfer tax. So it just lowers the closing costs. Rental developers like working with us because we also offer them low rate loans that they can't get otherwise. Sometimes if the housing units are affordable that they're proposing to build, they actually can unlock some federal tax credits that bring some more money into the deal. We offer very long terms, good terms, and some of the loans that we offer to developers are subsidized. I'll talk about that a little more, but there's a good reason we exist and people like borrowing from us for these financial reasons, not to mention we're just nice people. So going back, I mentioned that we offer down payment assistance. I call that DPA. So when I say DPA, it's down payment assistance. That's your closing costs or the down payment that you may not have 20% of a home's price. And so you may need some help with your down payment. Back in 2015, actually in 2014, we designed a program in the Commerce Department. At that point, the median home sale price was under $200,000. And we envisioned this program where we could sell state tax credits so that we could give $5,000 loans to buyers so they could have some money to help buy their home. The state tax credit program has been around since 2000. It started, we have a federal tax credit program that is brilliant and working well. And so the state in 2000 said, hey, we should have a state version of that. And so you all create something where if a bank or a captive insurance or something like that wants to buy some tax credits, in this case, it means we will sell $250,000 of tax credits. That means some bank bought that. It means they do not have to pay $250,000 that they otherwise would owe in taxes.
State taxes.
State taxes. It's on the bank franchise fee, which is on their deposits largely. This is who usually uses it. So they give us $250,000. They now get to write off $250,000 on their taxes.
Over how many years?
It's a 5-year tax credit. So how it really works is if they get to write off $250,000 for 5 years, that's $1.25 million in total. But there's a time value of money. A write-off 5 years from now is not as valuable as now. So there's a little discount there. And so we're selling these tax credits for usually north of 90 cents on the dollar, because there's a little discount to it. So what we end up with for this program is every year we have about $1.1 million that funds this down payment assistance pool that we can lend out. Because they're able to write off $1.25 million in their taxes, but they've paid 1.1 and change to us. And we then use that 1.1 million dollars to give out loans to first-time home buyers who are buying their first home.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, I mean, why should they give, sorry.
Hmm?
if the money is worth less to them, if the tax write-off is worth less to them over 5 years, that same money is also gonna do less for VHFA and for the
No,
bond.
because we get their dollars today. We get all 5 years today.
Okay,
So we get $1.1 million today and
and
we're.
you're gonna distribute right away.
That year. Oh, yeah. I don't have enough.
All right.
1.1's not enough. So that money has already been deployed. They are not able to write down their taxes for 5 more years.
Got it.
So.
Thank you.
I guess my question is, so we're talking about another tax credit program where it's worth a lot to the banks or purchasers that pay state taxes of one form or another. Dollar for dollar, they won't have to pay the taxes and the amount of tax credits they buy over 5 years, and they don't give us 100 cents on the dollar because the future isn't worth what the present is. And in return, we get the money right away. This is it not, though, a tax expenditure for the state? In other words, the $1.2 million is because the state has decided that that's okay, that we will distribute those. It would be equivalent to a grant of $1.2 million.
It would be the equivalent of an appropriation. to
Appropriation,
this.
that's what I mean.
But I wouldn't say a grant because we get the money back.
Right, yeah.
Which I'm going to explain all of that in the next few slides as well. What I wanted to point out with this chart is that when we designed the program, we thought we'd give people $5,000 at a pop. Home prices have, I don't know, increased a bit. So $5,000 doesn't get you as much as it used to 10 years ago. And so over time, we have changed how much we have given out in this program. You can see here, for the first several years, we gave out $5,000. Actually, what we were giving out was closer to $4,700 because not everyone needed the full $5,000. Some people had some assets, they bought a cheaper home, something like that. They didn't need the max. And you can see every year we don't quite award the max. And 1,500, I mean, 3/4 of the outstanding down payment assistance loans that are out there were done at that $5,000 limit or under that $5,000 limit. But in 2018, after the program had been around for several years, we saw that it wasn't keeping pace with the inflation of the home prices. So we upped it to $7,500 and we kept it there for a while. And you can see that right now we have outstanding just over 40 loans at that level. But during the pandemic, when home prices really skyrocketed up, we felt like we had to pull out all the stops and that we needed to do our part. We don't have to come back to you to ask for this. This is just an example. I want to say that I know that lots of times legislators like to put everything in statute to make sure that people administer programs well. Sometimes when you have mission-driven quasi-governmental organizations, we're going to do the right thing, even if you all don't tell us to. And this, I believe, was the right thing, which was we allowed people to get more down payment assistance because home prices were escalating. But we also decided that we should give more to the lowest income folks. And so you can see here that if borrowers were earning less than 80% of the area median income, they could get actually 15 grand. If they were earning more than that, they could only get 10 grand. So that black box is showing at the same time period, there were 2 paths up the mountain, one for lower income folks, one for higher income, trying to push the assistance to where it was needed most. People earning under 80% area median income in the height of the pandemic were more squeezed. They were, competing with cash offers. They were doing that. We were trying to do what was right to make sure they were served.
Maura, is the amount of the tax expenditure changed over time, or is it still?
It changed a few years ago, but it is in statute as a steady number, which right now is 250,000. I believe when it first started, it was at 100,000. One point we did ask for me. No, maybe it was 200. Anyway, we increased it a couple years ago. But for a chart I'm going to show in a couple slides, and I'm just going to tease you with this idea. There are reasons why we don't have as much money now. And we have had to ratchet it back down to 10,000 as our maximum available. And we are looking to further ratchet it back to a lower amount. Not because we think that home prices are heading in a different direction, but because the money's not going as far. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to make sure you know what we're doing with these loans. These are 0% loans where there's no payment on them. And so they have to be used for down payment and closing costs. You can't buy your next couch or draperies with them. But they only get repaid when you refinance your mortgage or you sell your home. And that's because this is only available to VHFA borrowers. We don't do refis. So a VHFA borrower, we help you get your home. But if you then have the kind of equity where you can refinance to a different rate, you're going to refinance away from us and you're going to work with a conventional lender to do that. So these folks must be true first-time homebuyers, meaning sometimes in federal programs, you can call yourself a first-time homebuyer, but you actually owned your home more than 3 years ago. And it's just been a long time. It's a federal rule. For us, it's like, no, you can't have been a homeowner before. And we make sure that people do not have a ton of assets. We want them to have some money in the bank. We want them to be able to pay for the boiler when it breaks inevitably 2 months after they buy the house. But we don't want them to not use their money and instead get access to free government money. We want people to have a reasonable amount of assets. And this down payment assistance, this loan can be combined with other types of down payment assistance, like the First Gen grant program and other programs. If you were to click this link, you could see this map and where these loans have been made, and you could scroll to your town and you could see how you could just search here by city and town, and you could see who's been helped in your community. We don't put this on the website, but we are tracking the employers of the borrowers so that we can see which employers are being helped by the fact that their workforce is being well served and buying a home. Employment changes over time. I want to be clear, but I just want to say this is at when they applied for the loan. Also, again, DPA's down payment assistance. I'm not going to tell you what an average Vermont home buyer is like, because I don't know. I don't have access to that data, but I can tell you what someone getting a VHFA DPA loan is like compared to someone who does not get the down payment assistance. And you can see in the middle column that a DPA borrower is going to have a lower appraised value on their home. They're buying the home at a lower purchase price. Therefore, they have a lower mortgage. Their incomes are lower. Their loan to value, I should have crossed out combined loan to value. I cut that out, it was too nerdy. But their loan to value is higher, meaning they put less of a down payment down. They only had 8% to put down as opposed to 15%. Their closing costs are less. They're buying cheaper homes. So I should hope that closing costs can be part of that. Their credit score is lower. They're younger. They have larger family sizes. They're more likely to be people of color. They're all going to be first-time home buyers, because I said that's one of the rules of the program. And they have more student loan debt. So now this chart shows you what's happening lately. We launched the program in 2015. We started giving out $5,000 to these first-time home buyers. 2016, no one refinanced, no one moved. Okay, 2017, no one refinanced, no one moved. They'd only had their mortgage for 2 years. That makes sense. By the third year after, a couple people did something. I don't know if they died. I don't know if they moved. I don't know if they refinanced. But what I know is that $34,000 got repaid to us because, again, this is a revolving loan fund and it gets paid back at a certain point. The next year that went up to 58 grand. And you can see that in 2021, look at this line. These are the average interest rates that Freddie Mac said were in effect each of these fiscal years. 2021, when interest rates were at 2.9%, those people were refinancing away from us. And that's fine. They're getting lower interest rates. That's what we want to happen. We're here to get people into homeownership, build up some equity. Then they want to refi away. Fine. What happens to us? We get all this DPA money back. Awesome. The system's working as intended. So each of these years I'm explaining, we were selling tax credits and getting some amount of money. Now it's 1.1 million. And we had $841,000 to also hand out, right? So 2022, when interest rates went up, we didn't get quite as much, but there was enough money to meet the need. In the last 2 years, as interest rates have gone up, no one's refinancing and not a lot of people are moving. So we're getting less and less back. So now we have to live within our budget, which is 1.1 million plus some amount of this. Demand has been high though, and we are going back to the point of having to ratchet back the program. We couldn't still give $15,000 to lower income people. We had to bring that down to 10,000. We're looking at, do we need to lower it below 10,000? Do we need to look at that asset limit? $30,000, which includes their down payment that they are making and includes some cash they're gonna have once the loan closes and all. Should we bring that down to 20,000? Meaning, out of that 20 grand, again, their closing costs have to come out of it. So they may spend 12,000 on closing costs. So actually 20 grand is only 8,000 left to pay for the boiler. I don't know, I get nervous when I make them live on too thin of a liquid budget after buying a home, because I don't want to get someone into homeownership only to have them have a bad homeownership outcome. We have not served them if they end up in foreclosure, especially quickly, but at all. So do we look at the geographic diversity and start saying, you know what, no more loans in the towns where we've done a lot of business? I don't like that. You know, do we have other measures? I'll tell you, lenders don't like an income threshold because one, that's hard to advertise and market and communicate. Two, you'd be amazed at how everyone defines income. And I could tell you what my income is, because I don't know, I have some number in my head of what I make. But then when I fill out my taxes, turns out I make a different amount. And I don't know how that happens, but like, okay, yeah, I guess my savings account did write me a check for $85 over the course of the year. And my, you know, things come in. People think they qualify for some amount of money. They don't. So we need to work with lenders to figure out how we ratchet back the program.
What does IORTA stand for?
That's a good question. That is, I should have mentioned, so in addition to selling these state tax credits, VHFA has put $2 million of our own money in to this pool because we just really want to keep this program alive. It is important to us, and so we put some of our own money where our mouth is. Also, I said that this program can be paired with the First Generation Homebuyer Grant Program. So the $3 million y'all have appropriated to us has helped not to be this loan. It's a grant, it's different, but maybe it's taken a little pressure off having to get this loan because I have a $15,000 grant. In addition, IORTA stands for Interest on Real Estate Trust Accounts. Interest on Real Estate Trust Accounts. And that is in statute that says that anyone who's bought a home, you may be familiar with this concept, that if I want a home, I put in an offer and I'm going to say I write a $10,000 check and I give it to the seller, and the realtor will deposit that check in an interest-bearing account at a market rate. It will earn some amount of money, and every so often that bank where it was deposited has to sweep that account and give all the interest earned to VHFA, because the 10,000 goes back into the sale, but the interest earned on the 10 grand, you do that enough times, there's some interest. If they know that it's going to be really short term, they actually don't have to invest it in an interest bearing account. But like new construction, when you're building a condo development and people are giving you substantial payments and it's going to sit there for 18 months, you can earn some real interest. VHFA is named as the entity who receives that. And then it says in statute, we have to spend that on down payment assistance. And right now we do that focusing on shared equity homes, which is a special nonprofit type of homeownership that Chris can talk about another time when he's in the witness chair.
Yep, but before you go, and you may have said it and I missed it. The interest rates that you showed were not your rates. Those were the overall rates.
Right.
What do your rates look like for these buyers that you are supporting?
So we don't have different rates for down payment assistance or non-down payment assistance, but I could do a chart that shows you what the going Freddie Mac published 30-year fixed rate mortgages are compared to what our average borrowers have gotten each month. I haven't done it in a couple of years. No one's asked me that. But when I did it, we're usually half a point below what the going rates are. But we track that every day by every lender. Not every lender is the same rate. It's a little complicated, but if I look at the Freddie Mac average to us, we're always a half point below.
Did you have Rep. Burrows a question?
I just asked her what it was. What was IORTA?
Okay.
So this is gonna make your eyes bleed, but if you wanna know how I would fix the problem,
Sure.
is could we have the ability to sell these tax credits for a couple more years? Right now in statute, by the end of FY '26, we need to stop selling these tax credits and live off the repayments that we're getting. I'm nervous that we will not have enough repayments and that we will have to curtail the program. Going to your question, Representative Lamont, you asked about interest rates. In most states, housing finance agencies like ours actually they change their interest rate for people who get down payment assistance. And that's how they're funding the down payment, is that the people actually are paying for it. The buyers are paying for it. They would pay a higher interest rate to get the down payment help at the beginning. And at the end of the day, the lender usually makes out more than the buyer does. Vermont's unique in that you all allow us to use these tax credits so that the buyer isn't financing their own, subsidizing their own benefit. But right now, we have the ability to sell these tax credits through 2026. So I'm just gonna-
Statutory,
Yep,
so everybody, in other words, the tax expenditure, where we as a state agreed to tolerate 1.25 million a year in giving tax credits to people. That program terminates in 2026 with the then idea, oh, well, the program will be self-supporting because by then people will be paying, enough people be selling their houses or refinancing their houses. So the money would, every time you sell or refinance, right off the top, you repay that amount. And so it would self-finance, and she's about to explain, no, for various.
Well, and so to that point, this blue summary at the bottom shows you that thick line annual claims of credits already approved. In FY '25, the state is foregoing $1.25 million. And it's going to forego $1.25 million in FY '26 because we're going to sell credits that year too. But in FY '27, you can see that if we don't sell more credits, that liability to the state goes down. And so by fiscal year 31, we're not costing the state any money. And you're right, we'd have enough money and it would all churn and revolve and work. And it will do that because even if interest rates stay at 6 or 7%, right now they're about 7%, that's not 1980s level interest rates, okay? Like, I'm sorry, I know we're all used to having 3% mortgages, but a 6% mortgage, the world won't end if mortgages stayed around 6%.
Some of us were old enough to remember 15,
18%, exactly. It is not going to be economic devastation if interest rates stayed 6%. Right now, what we're dealing with is the velocity change of being at 2.5%, 3% mortgages
Okay.
so many years, and then all of a sudden getting twice that within 6 months. That, I think, is helping to freeze the market. But at some point, even if rates never lower and they stay at 7% for the next decade, I'm sorry, some people are going to move. Some people are going to die. Some people are going to refinance because their job changed or something's going to happen and we're going to get some repayments. Right now, if you can help it, no, you should see the hoops I went through in the past year through a divorce of not having to get rid of that mortgage rate. You know what I mean? It's just, you want to keep that mortgage. So the blue shows what is already happening. And if you do nothing, the blue colors are what our reality is. The green shows you the fiscal impact if you were to allow us at the same level to continue to sell these credits for another 5 years, to buy us a little more tail on this for a little longer. That is something that we plan on asking Ways and Means and Senate Finance for. And I wanted to let you know what we were thinking about because this committee has been so supportive of our down payment assistance program.
Do you have an end date in mind or?
2031.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yep, it'd be 5 years. So in 2031, you can see that would be, it'd be that full 1.25 million, and then it would the tail would drag out. And by 2036, we'd be down to zero.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Before she goes on,
Mhm.
any questions from the committee on that? You're sort of thinking, aren't you?
Okay, yeah, I am. I'm sorry.
We can all see you thinking.
So this, does the increase in home prices in the long term affect the effectiveness of $10,000 loan, $5,000 loans? And if they continue even moderately the way they are we still looking at cutting down to
Problem.
$10,000?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Someday the affordable homes that VHFA is financing are gonna be $500,000. I mean, I hope it's not for many, many, many decades, but the trajectory, history shows home prices in the state just go up. And so what will $10,000 get you? And will we have to give more than 10,000? Will we be meeting the need? You're right. And but I'm also not gonna ask y'all for millions of dollars
I
just to sit on it. And also this is, at some point, we could look to adjust our interest rates to have people finance a little bit of it, not the whole thing, as I was just explaining. Maybe we do look at the criteria in different ways. I don't know. I wouldn't want to ask for more than I can foreseeably use in the next 5-10 years.
Okay.
And right now, this feels reasonable. But you're right. Separate from that program, in the last 3 years, the legislature has given us 3 different times in 22, 23, and 24, $1 million each year to fund a first generation homebuyer grant program. That program started in this committee. It came out of a lot of conversations about stemming from the chart on the left here, which is our racial homeownership gap. What this chart is showing you, the blue bars are showing you that white households, 74% of white households in Vermont own their home. Black and African-American households, only 27% of them own their home. This is worse than the gap that we see nationally. Nationally, we know that about 71% of white households own their home and 42% of Black households own their home. So we have a bigger gap than the nation does. And both the nation and Vermont, that gap has only grown since Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. 4 days later, we passed the fair housing legislation that finally outlawed race-based lending. So we have only lost ground since we started being colorblind to race-based lending.
But,
I was just curious what Latinos are considered in.
Latinos, according to the Census Bureau, are an ethnicity, not a race.
Right.
And so you can be any of these races and be Latino, and then you can be non-Hispanic, Hispanic.
So can
So
you track it or is there no way?
we do ask about ethnicity in this program, and the census tracks ethnicity.
Yeah.
But you can't cross tab the two
No.
easily because you can be Black and Hispanic, white and Hispanic, and the rest. Yeah.
So there's no way to know.
There's no way to know what the homeownership rate is by ethnicity?
Yeah.
No, I believe there is. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
I would love to see that.
I'd be happy to show you. Yeah, I can follow up with that.
Thank you.
So the first generation program, I think I talked to you about before. Actually, I think the next slide shows, this is the eligibility. You have to be a first time home buyer and your parents can't have owned a home, or if they did, if your parents owned a home, they may have lost it in foreclosure, meaning that they don't have that asset to draw from, or we're in the foster care system. The point is, is it gets this idea that not all of us are lucky enough to have parents own a home. And even if they did, not all of our parents wrote us a check when it came time for us to buy a home. That is not a given. And the data and research is clear that it happens a lot of the time. And so if a parent owns a home, they sometimes, and VHFA sees this with our borrowers, there is a gift that is in the closing statement. A lot of times the source of that gift is the parent. Theoretically, knowing that the middle class, the largest source of wealth is our home's equity. A lot of research shows that probably people are drawing on their own home's equity to help their kid out in some way.
Dr. Burrows.
Of those two categories, parents or foster care, is either one of them prioritized over the other? No.
You don't.
I was just going to guess.
Have you tracked what's happened in terms of race? Who's gotten the first gen?
Yep, then just be patient. So yes, we have, so here's who's eligible for it. And then you can see here, we've done about 116 grants. They get the full 15,000 usually. They have a lower income than those numbers I was showing you before. They're buying a home. 18% identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Now let me tell you another horrific stat, and this is a VHFA stat. So when we looked, before we had this program open, we looked at VHFA borrowers and how many were people of color. And in the 5 years prior to this program, we averaged 3% of our borrowers were people of color. I will say we had an exceedingly high number of people who didn't furnish the information, and we couldn't get the information from lenders, and we didn't push the issue a lot. With this program, they have to fill out paperwork and we have to have them furnish there still is a way to not furnish it, but we make it a little harder. So we really want to know this, because when this program came out, again, first generation does not mean race. We can't do race-based lending. That is illegal for us. But it can be a proxy. And in the statute, it says, if we give you this $1 million and you roll out this program, we want you to engage with the Native American Council and NAACP and BIPOC-led organizations and communities, and we want you to engage them in the design and development of this program, as well as the outreach and marketing. We did that. We were very successful. And so since this program's been around, we went from 3% of our borrowers being people of color to now 10% of our borrowers being people of color. And I don't have the 2024 numbers yet, but I bet you it's going to be higher. And so we've tripled that percentage of who we can serve. And like it says, about 18%.
But you say 18%.
That says 18.
18% of the people using this program
And so now.
are
you're
people of
going
color.
3%.
But if you look at VHFA's program, this is only 116. We do a lot more loans than that. If you look at our portfolio of who we're giving loans to, we've tripled the percentage of who are getting loans from VHFA. They're not all first gen.
Yeah.
And it's not all first gen though, because some of it is, we are now engaged and reaching out to communities and having conversations in ways that when I say these are horrific stats, that we were not doing a good enough job with historically. And so the Maya Angelou quote, we're doing the best we can until we know better. And when we know better, we do better. And this is an example of it.
Dr. Burrows.
Is there such a thing as a category of homes that are first, like not loans, but the homes themselves that are categorized for first generation buyers?
Kind of like a first generation college student. They can go to any college they want, whatever fits their needs. I will talk about a different program we have where we've been building affordable starter homes that are modest in size and all that. They're more affordable, so maybe folks would be interested in that, but we don't have any kind of restriction on this.
There's no categorization.
No. In fact, we want housing choice. We want people to use this money to buy whatever home works for them.
So where is the 240,000 everywhere where they can find a home?
Yeah, I don't like this map. I have to say, I don't know if you can tell if those are numbers. I think it's hard to read, but you can see where the loans have been that we've done, 6 in Bennington County, 3 in Windham County, 10 in Windsor County, 18 in Rutland County, and working your way up from there.
And what's the one that's 3?
Grand Isle County.
Okay.
Yep.
And one,
So, and we have, we're big into dashboards online. We have a dashboard that shows by town and all that where all these are happening. So, so we've gotten $3 million, $1 million a year for 3 years. We're gonna easily spend this year's money. We would like another $1 million so that we can keep this program open. We see it's been tremendously successful. Not only has it been successful in the 116 households we've served, it also has been successful in the new conversations that, yes, we've had new conversations with Black-led and communities of color, Black-led organizations, but also we're having these fantastic conversations with lenders, banks and credit unions. Vermont Federal Credit Union, when they heard about this program, without us asking anything, we found out after the fact, they put up $1,500 of their own money to pair with the $15,000 we were doing. So anyone who gets a first generation grant, they will put some of they're putting up private capital to make it $16,500. And so we're talking to other lenders about like, hey, what can you all do about in that regard? There has been a tremendous, this program has created the leverage for us to have conversations with lenders about what they're doing to serve people of color in a way that would not have been possible if we hadn't brought a little money to the table and a program upon which we could start those
It's
conversations.
the third year this year.
Yep, and we're gonna run out of that money soon. So we would like another $1 million. There's also a question of, it's hard to go through the appropriations process in this building for $1 million every year, forever forward. And so we are wondering if there's an appetite, going back to those state tax credits. Could we increase how much we sell in state tax credits a little bit? So that we could have the money, some of it would be a grant, and every year we'd have to, that would not have a sunset, to your point, like we'd have to leave that open, so that every year we'd $1 million that could keep this program open. But then still sunset the loan part, because the DPA program is a revolving loan fund. So I'm using the same tool in 2 different ways, but that would be a nice way to sustain this program going forward. And not have to ask for $1 million.
Have you, in terms of specific numbers and ideas, have you engaged with Tiff? Lindley?
Yes.
Okay.
And you know what she said? Talk to this committee.
That's a common thing.
It's do it all, right?
Yeah.
Do it all
Exactly.
right.
So yes, she's aware of these high level ideas and she wants me to bring them to you all to see if they have any merit. She's only going to consider the things you all say merit.
I know, but do you have, I think what you want to do, please, is send us an email with the amounts, the idea specifically stated in numbers,
I
okay?
have legal language I can send.
Great, that's what we want,
I
okay.
know how this works.
No promises, of course.
I know.
I
Yes.
just wanted to do a special shout out. The person that you pictured is
Aw.
at Spectrum Services and works with kind of is in charge of like multicultural youth programming at Spectrum. So
Yes.
like these investments
Mhm.
are totally paying forward and building out empowering community
Yeah.
generation upon generation, not just for the family member, but like for our whole communities. And so I think that's a great person to highlight.
I'm nervous because I have 11 more slides and only 11 more minutes, but if you were to click this, you see a 3-minute video where Zainab talks about going from being homeless and at Lund and how she got her degree, and this is her daughter, and she reunited with her husband, and she's a new American. It's a wonderful story of moving through the rental market into homeownership. And she was the very first borrower that we had through New England Federal Credit Union.
That's great.
So I encourage you, because you have this on your website, to click that link and watch that video.
Thank you.
Another way that that VHFA is helping serve the state is through a rental revolving loan fund program that you all gave $10 million to a couple years ago. This was something we went to banks and asked banks, when developers say that projects aren't penciling and they're not working, what are the lending limitations that you're finding? Because I want to go back to the point I made when I first testified to you all. VHFA is just here to fill market gaps. We're not here to do what the banks do necessarily. We're here to do what they can't do. And the banks talked about where they saw the gaps. We also know that employers are seeing gaps. Employers are desperate to house their workforce. So desperate that they feel the need to go it alone and build and own and operate their own housing to mix success, I'll say. So Middlebury College, though, has been a fantastic leader. They went, bought some land, held it for 3 years, picked a developer. The developer had enough time to get the permits and assemble the capital and do what's necessary. And now there's gonna be 250 homes built in Middlebury, 26 manufactured offsite homes that are gonna be affordable, market rate rental building, a tax credit affordable building, and more. And here's an example of an employer who knew that Middlebury College, their staff and professors and leadership are 30% of Middlebury's population. So they knew that if you add 250 homes to Middlebury, they don't need to lay claim and own a bunch of them. They just know that probably 30% of those homes are going to serve people associated with their college. The Upper Valley employers, Mascoma Bank and King Arthur Flour and others, had a different model where they knew that they could invest in community-based housing so that their workforce would be supported by it. But even if their employees don't live in that housing, their employees are going to be happier living in the Upper Valley area because they know that they have daycare workers who are living in that housing, or the restaurants are open more often because the wait staff can afford to live in that housing. When we talk about how to engage employers, it doesn't always have to be that the employer has to be the one to get into housing. Because employers don't always know everything they need to about landlord-tenant laws or fair housing or state's housing policy. But employers have some money, and some of them are happy to contribute it to housing. So we created a program where if an employer or a municipality chipped in 5% of the cost of building the housing, we were going to subsidize the loan and give them better loan terms. I'm going to skip over out of time. This revolving loan fund means that we will give a developer 35% of what they need to build the home. The rest of it they get from a bank. Okay, again, we don't need to recreate banks. So this is a subordinate loan. It starts often as a construction loan. It may just be 3 years. It can convert to be a permanent loan. We could do a 30-year loan. And we subsidize the interest rate based on how much the project needs. Not all the projects get 0% interest rates. Actually, like one did. Most of them got 2 to 3% interest rates, but that's a subsidized rate from what you can get from a bank. And that's how we used your appropriation, was to buy down that interest rate. And so what do we get in terms of affordability for that? We get that however long the owner of that property is enjoying a subsidized interest rate, they are keeping that housing affordable plus 3 more years. So if they get a 30-year loan, it means that housing is going to be affordable for 33 years. If they decide that the economics change and after 10 years, they want to pay back their loan early, that's fine. They then have 13 years of affordability. And so what happens at that point? Previous to that, we are trying to keep rents around 3% and that they don't go up more than 3%. And we are looking at the income levels of people moving in every time someone moves in. But after that affordability expires, what do we get? Well, for one, we just got 10, 13 years of affordable housing. That's something we got for that investment. 2, even if that converts to market rate, we still got some housing in that community. And I need to be very clear that more housing in our communities will help our state's economy, full stop. And what do at the end of whenever they're done with the loan? They pay us back the loan. We have the cash. We then take that cash and we give it to a new project. Okay, so it's not, they haven't gotten rich off it and they're not pocketing the cash. It comes back to VHFA. We do more of the same. Now, here's a mistake we made. I'm very comfortable telling you all my flaws about like how we're not serving BIPOC Vermonters enough. And here's another one. When we wrote the legislation, you should know better than to put a number in the statute. We said that the rent increase was going to be capped at 3% a year. And that is still our goal and still our intention and still what we want to see. I don't know if you've heard, but last year property taxes went up a little more than 3%.
No.
And insurance costs have definitely gone up more than 3%. It is not responsible government for us to award a project and say you have to live with a 3% rent increase, knowing that some of these expenses out of their control are going up more than that. If we keep them to a 3% rent increase, it means there will be deferred maintenance, and pretty soon a government subsidized building is going to fall into disrepair. Are looking through the Budget Adjustment Act and would love this committee's support, because this may be another thing that Representative Bloomley is aware of. We would love to be able to cross out the 3% and say that our target is still 3%, our intention is 3%. You can actually leave it in there, but please allow us the ability for VHFA to look at the budgets of these projects. And if they can prove to us that there is a need to go above the 3%, that we be able to allow that on certain circumstances in certain years, not blanket forever, but when it's called for. This is very similar to the type of compliance oversight that we do in the 9,500 apartments that we serve with other government resources. There's two questions on behind.
Please.
Is there an existing benchmark that might be connected to similar like consumer price index, cost of living index? Is there a
No, because the rents,
it's a different,
right.
it's not consumer
So
expenses, it's
local.
landlord and, okay.
And it's not just the rent increases, it's really the cost increases. So that's why what's better is for us to look at the actual expenditures and the budgets and say, make your case of why 3% is not the right number. And then look at the actual expenses for that project. But there is no CPI equivalent for cost increases.
So the program or VHCD would be the ones making that decision on.
VHFA.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's why I have those in orange, is because right now the program's designed to be a 3%, a max 3% increase annually. And that after they pay back the loan, you're capped at the 3%. We'd like the ability for VHFA to determine the actual percentage if they can make that case.
Is there a way other than saying determine that there's some kind of metric so it's not so wide open?
Well, I would think the language we have proposed says that the 3% is the target and that that's what we're going for. And if they're going to get a waiver over that they have to come to VHFA to get a waiver from the 3%.
Okay.
I just don't want to have to come to you all every time I have this stuff.
Okay.
So this just explains that of the $10 million that you all appropriated, we actually used some of the treasurer's 10% for Vermont money, the LIAC, the Local Investment Advisory Council money, to create this program. And we were able to fund about 300 apartments. 260 of them are affordable because sometimes people have some market rate units in there. If anyone's looking at this map, I do know that St. Albans is not in Grand Isle County. That's another mistake. I'm just going to show you all my mistakes here. I didn't make the map, but what you can see here is that of the 10 million that you all appropriated, we were able to capture $21 million of employer and municipal investments for these projects. They're not all built and done. So some of these municipalities, I'm a little worried that they're saying like, oh, we'll throw tons in and that may not come to fruition. But this is the commitments that we have right now. And so when you're hearing about conversations about how to engage employers more in employer-based housing, I want to point to this tool to say, this is the kind of community-based housing that employers can tap into and can benefit from. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the employer has to be the owner operator of the housing. Because they're really good at making widgets. I don't know that all of them are great housers. We had another program, the Middle Income Homeownership Development Program I referenced. This was similar to the rental program in that we'll just pay 35% of what they need. These are developers of for sale homes. The average size is 1,300 square feet. These are very modest homes. if a developer, if we give them money for 35% of their development, that could pay for the difference between what a home appraises for and what a home costs to build and what it appraises for. So if it costs me 500,000 to build a home, it may right off the bat only appraise for 400. So we'll cover that 100 grand difference. That's critical. This is why homes don't get built, is because you can't borrow on that. If it doesn't appraise, no lender is going to give you money for it. So this was, it covered that value gap. Then, if there still was capacity, like they still hadn't spent their 35% of their development costs that they had available, they could, instead of selling the home for 400 grand, they could price it down to 350 or 325 or something, and that would be the affordability gap. And that's how we made homes more affordable. You can see the 20 communities here where we were able to invest these resources. In total, y'all gave us $24 million for this program. Again, we spent it all in the first year. Sorry, we're very good at our jobs. We funded 125 homes. I was trying to figure out how many people that means. It's probably about 400 people, because some people share bedrooms. We were giving about $130,000 per home, and they were buying the homes for $195,000. The statute for this program says that at least 1/3 of the money has to go to the shared equity model, which was a perpetual affordability homeownership model. But we had also a requirement that we had to favor the most affordable homes, and that's often going to be the shared equity homes. So more than half this money went to shared equity. And so here are some of the homeowners who are already in their homes. This just says more about the benefits.
The shared equity is like what Champlain, like these trusts, like housing trusts that, aside from, is it Burlington Housing Trust, Champlain Housing Trust? What are the housing trusts out there?
The shared housing program blankets the entire state. There are regional nonprofits who administer that program. And so, yes, there are several, and
Let me ask, it's now 2:00 or a little after. Maura, first of all, in a less than ideal world, how much would you like? Time, not money.
Oh, I can be done in less than 5 minutes. I only have 2 slides left.
Maybe be okay with our meeting for another 5 minutes?
Yep.
Thank you.
So there are a few stats about the program. That's kind of probably already what I told you. I want you to know about other resources that we have at VHFA. One, I've been talking a lot about employer assisted housing, and I talked about the program. But this guide here on the left, this is a resource we launched, we publicized this summer and are now doing a little dog and pony shows about, which is if you have employers who want to get engaged in housing, there's ways to do it other than owning and operating housing. And this is a guide that tells you all sorts of great ideas. You can chip in money, but you also could do other things. This gets into farm worker housing and other models. So that's on our website, the Employer Assisted Housing Guide. Also on the right here, opportunities. This report just came out today. Off-site construction, manufactured housing. We need ways of lowering the cost of construction. We have to invest in innovation. And so this looks at what has been done in Vermont. Some of you are familiar with the Vermont model of housing. You're familiar with Huntington Homes. You may have heard of a plant in Fairhaven that went out of business several years ago that used to manufacture homes in the state of Vermont. It's looking at what is Vermont's history with this? What are the national trends in this area? What are the benefits of offsite panelized and manufactured housing? What are the current opportunities that Vermont has available to it today? And then what are the next steps that the state should be looking at to support that kind of innovation?
Is the employer assisted housing guide and the other guide, are they in hard copy?
Yes, and we can get
And you
copies.
get copies for the entire committee delivered to us?
Yep.
Thank you.
I can do that. We also have this housing data website. I hope someday you all look at this where you can see information about your municipality and what the housing needs and data is. It's an inventory of where all the affordable housing is in the state. This Housing Ready Toolkit is a resource if you have a housing commission or committee locally where they're saying, how do I know what the housing needs are? We walk people through how to do a housing needs assessment locally. Then when you find out what your housing needs are, they're different for each of our towns. So it tells you what policy tools are available that have been utilized in Vermont or nationally. You know, do you want to look at inclusionary zoning? Do you want to look at a landlord registry? Do you want to look at density bonuses? Lots of things like that. And lastly, we are trying to incentivize all hands on deck with addressing this housing crisis. So we know we need to support more developers. Some people are builders or they may be contractors, and to get into the development game. So we have some programs where not only will we give you funding to build the housing, but we're also going to give you the technical assistance to if you're a new and emerging developer. And so that is something BHFA has been funding that we're rolling out now. In a few months, we have a BIPOC developer TA program launching in partnership with the Land Access and Opportunity Board. And we're going to be targeting BIPOC developers. There's a handful who we know of who would like to get into the housing development game. These are all going to be largely small developers, looking at anywhere from 4 to 20 units, let's say. There also is a Homes for All program through the Department of Housing, and they have money to support technical assistance that they are going to be rolling out in the next few months. So we're working in partnership with them to make sure that all this TA works well together with similar providers. So to recap, these are our priorities. The first one is to extend that tax credit program by 5 more years to support the down payment assistance program. The third one, because I'm really they're a little out of order, is to continue and sustain the first generation homebuyer grant program. I talked about that $1 million. Maybe we could use the tax credit program to do that. The second bullet, because again, it's out of order, is to tweak that revolving loan fund so that we can manage the increases still with that 3% target, but allow for some flexibility there. I don't have time to talk about group net metering and how we want to be able to still use that in affordable rental housing, but I'm happy to talk to your energy environmental colleagues as well as any of you if you want to talk about that. There was a report that came out this week that looked at what are we going to do now that Act 250 exemptions are widely available. It used to be that that was an incentive to build affordable housing in our downtowns because we had priority housing projects, PHPs. Now that Act 250 exemptions are available for all sorts of housing, what's the new thing we're going to do to make sure that we don't leave affordable housing behind and that there's room for it in our downtown? So that there was a study committee that BHFA and others participated in. That report came out this week, so we support those recommendations. We support the next steps of our own report that talks about the offsite manufactured housing. I'd be happy to come back and talk about that if that's of interest. The Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont. I don't know if you've heard from Frank Knack yet, but we are a part of HHAV, have been a standing member of that for forever and helped develop those priorities and stand behind those. As well as I know you heard from Moreau earlier this week, we are a part of the Let's Build Homes campaign and support those priorities. What I didn't overtly put in here, and I really should, is that if y'all want to support more money for the rental revolving loan fund and the middle income homeownership program, those 2 middle income programs, that would be welcomed because those are closed down programs. And so as I talk about how to get employers to chip in money and engage them, that has worked for the past year because I had a program that they could chip in money to. Without that program, that is one less tool that we have in the toolbox to bring in that $21 million to pair with what we have.
Any final questions from members of the committee?
Just say that last part again.
So if we had
you have 21 million that you can seek.
Well, when we had the $10 million appropriation, we were able to get 21 million of other dollars to pair in. And now that we spent all that money, we do not have that resource, but as a part of the HHAV priorities, it has money to reopen and restart and fund the middle income homeownership and the rental revolving loan fund. That's a part of that suite of what HHAV is looking for in addition to other investments.
And that middle income isn't necessarily like, you don't have to be first gen.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, two different, the lending programs we do are consumer based. It's, you know, for you. These middle income programs are developer based. We're trying to build the housing so that it's affordable to middle income folks. They may get a VHA mortgage, they may not. It's two different types of things. Money for developers or money for home buyers.
Thank you very much.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Thank you.
We will take them online. Our first, on Tuesday, when we reconvene, we will have first the floor, I believe, and then
Floor is at 10 a.m. Then we'll have 45 minutes of testimony from 11 to 11:45. And then we'll break until 1 p.m.
great. And one thing I said I would do, which I haven't done yet, is after talking to you, assign specific areas, but also buddy relationships with various committees. I know I am going to serve as a liaison to the Appropriations Committee because of a certain cast of my own. But if someone would like to help me with that, they're very welcome to, just tell me. Okay? And I think what that entails is important. The Budget Adjustment Act, which as you remember is sort of a true up, but like everything else under the sun, it's an opportunity. It's not just a true up, it's an opportunity to, you know, sort of a mid-year opportunity. The reality is that the Budget Adjustment Act doesn't get out of here until end of February. And the budget gets out of here in July. So it's not that, or June, it's not that big a difference, but it's still important. And we owe a letter from this committee to the Appropriations Committee. And the deadline, I believe, for that letter is the 23rd of this month.
Oh,
Yes, the BAA moves very
Thursday?
quickly. So the 23rd is next week,
Thursday.
Thursday. So we're gonna get, so what we will do, what I'll do is talk to Tiffany Bloom. Representative Bloomley is the person on the committee, the Appropriations Committee, who's doing housing. And I will talk to her and then I will consult with you and do a rough draft, which I will bring to the committee as just part of our work. And the committee has to sign off on this draft. And what they want from us, I know this, they really can't stand it. When committees send them something, they used to be we, in my case, saying, oh, we want it all, go for it. We have to prioritize. You don't have to say necessarily how much, but we have to prioritize. Okay? It's just, they really want, I mean, they don't want to do it. They want us to do it.
And so I just want to make sure, so what we've heard from you is stuff that you would have us prioritize these for the budget adjustment?
No, some of them are BAA, but most of them are from the budget. If you have BAA.
Yeah.
The BAA would be that 3% waiver allowance because that program was funded last year. And so developers, we're closing on the loans to developers. And if they need to be able to structure their loans, knowing if they have to live within a 3% cap or not. So that would be a policy thing, but not cost any money. But important to go into BAA because it has policy, funding it.
Okay, great.
Okay, so you owe us language. You may as well throw that in the BAA, okay? Right away. Great. Is there anybody on the committee before we adjourn for the week? Congratulations on having survived our first week. We've had quite a bit of testimony in a week and a half. I've learned a lot. I hope you have too. And we'll get some repetition so we get a chance to hear again some of the more difficult things. And I hope you all have great weekends. So with that, if it's okay with you,